Students, till now we have talked about the representation of data in a tabular form, right? We discussed about the group frequency table and the ungrouped frequency table. Now we'll be talking about the graphical representation of data. Now there are three methods to do that. The first one is by drawing a bar graph. The second one is histogram. Further, in histogram there are two categories. One is histogram of uniform width. The second one is of varying width, right? The third one is the frequency polygon. We'll be starting with the bar graph. You have already studied about bar graphs in previous classes, right? Bar graphs, they are nothing but representation of data in rectangles, right? So let us start with this question and we'll try to draw the bar graph for this situation or this question. We are given the expenditure of a family, right? It has in total 20,000 rupees. It has 20,000 rupees and it is spending 4,000 on grocery, right? Expenditure is expressed in 1,000 rupees. So 4 means 4,000. It is spending 4,000 on grocery items, 6,000 on rent, 5,000 on education and 5,000 on medicine, right? To understand this better, I wish to make a bar graph of it. So the first step of making a bar graph is to make a vertical as well as a horizontal axis, right? I'm going to call the vertical axis as y-axis and I will be calling the horizontal axis as the x-axis, right? So I have marked some divisions on the y-axis and some divisions on the x-axis, right? So I have decided that on the x-axis I'll be representing the heads and on the y-axis I'll be representing the expenditure, right? On the y-axis I'll be representing the expenditure and on the x-axis I'll be representing the heads, right? Now before starting with this question, you need to specify the units that you are taking on the x-axis and the units that you are taking on the y-axis. So let's say on x-axis 1 unit is equal to 1 head. 1 unit is equal to 1 head, right? And on y-axis 1 unit is equal to rupees 1,000, right? It is very important for you to specify the units or the scale before you start drawing the bar graph, right? This is also called as the scale of the graph. Scale of the graph, right? So we have specified the scale. Now let us start with the data that is given to us. First we are given that the first head is grocery. So I'm not going to start from 0, I'll be starting with 1, right? So the grocery we are spending 4,000 rupees. Now on y-axis, where is 4? Here it is 4, right? So 1 unit corresponds to grocery. So I'll be writing this as G, right? This division 1 to 2, it will be representing the expenditure on grocery, that is represented by G, right? So how much money is spent on grocery? 4,000. So this is 4, right? So this is 4. Now what we need to do is we need to draw a rectangle. So let me draw the rectangle. The height of the rectangle, it is equal to the expenditure that the family is doing on grocery item, right? And the width of the rectangle, it is equal to 1 unit and it is corresponding to the grocery head, right? Similarly, what we'll be doing is we'll be plotting rent on the graph as well. So for rent, I'm going to choose the interval 3 to 4 and let me represent it by R, right? So 3 to 4 represented by R, it shows the rent. So how much money is spent on rent? 6,000. So here is 6. Let me mark the point. So we have to draw a rectangle. So this corresponds to the head or the expenditure that is spent on rent, right? Now the next one is education. For education I'll be using 5 to 6, right? And 5,000 is spent on education. So this is 5, right? This is the rectangle that corresponds to the money or the expenditure on education. The next one is medicine, right? So medicine I'll be representing in this division, that is from 7 to 8, represented by M, right? So medicine we are spending 5,000 rupees. So 5,000 again will correspond to this. Right? So we have drawn different rectangles that are representing different heads. we have heads on the x-axis and we have the expenditure on the y-axis. Always mention what you have on the y-axis, that is expenditure, right, on the y-axis, and the heads on the x-axis, right. Now you can easily compare that the maximum expenditure, it is being spent on this head, that is rent, that the maximum is spent on rent. Why? Because the height, it is maximum for rent. So you can say that the maximum expenditure is for rent and the minimum it is for grocery items, right. So it is very easy for you to compare the data when you have presented it in a form of bar graphs. This is nothing but a bar graph, right. Bar means rectangle, right. So when you represent the entities with the help of rectangle, then the graph is known as the bar graph, right. On the x-axis we have represented the heads and on the y-axis we have represented the expenditure, right. So it is very easy to draw any inference or any observation from this kind of graphical representation, right. Now you might be wondering that we have left 1 unit space in between each head, right, and we have taken the head as 1 unit. Now this was not a very this is not important to us, right. We could have taken the head as 2 units, right, and we could have spent no space between the 2 consecutive heads, right. But to make the data more presentable, we usually keep the spacing equal in between all the heads, right. You need to keep the spacing equal in between all the heads so that the data, it is presentable, right.